Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Fallen London. Today we're going to be carrying on with December's exceptional story, The House of Silk and Flame. The gardens of the palace are a wonder of the Elder Continent. Silken tapestries, elusive and delicate as breath, hang suspended from trellises. The gardens are filled with wild flowers in 7 vibrant hues. Ivy cleaves to elegant greenstone columns cultivated to resemble webs that span the stone. Sherbet and wine flow in fountains along a grand terrace which runs between the palace and the gardens. Guests looking for air, or those not important enough to secure an invitation to the interior, mingle there in the Vestia night. So shall we start off by confirming the plan? That's a little bit of a recap. The princess takes you to a secluded courtyard to discuss the ball. Spiders cling to a disused fountain, forming webs around a statue of weavers. We must ensure that when the prince leaves for the House of Silk and Flame, he does so in our carriage, not his own. It is too recognizable. We must sabotage his carriage and find a means of distracting the tyrant's guard so that I might bring in our own vehicle. I would also like a chance to talk to some of the guests. I will need allies in the future. And afterwards, we should travel to the house. I would perform my royal duty to the Great Spider. Doing so extends the time before the tyrant realizes anything is amiss. Sounds easy enough. So we need a spider, so let's try and attract one. Every guest is required to bring a spider for the tyrant. Fortunately, the gardens are rife with arachnids. They have been cultivated there by the royal house of Vestia for centuries. Armed with only a rushlight and your own courage, you slip away from the bright lanterns and laughter of the party and enter the dark gardens of Vestia. The gardens of Vestia are labyrinthine. Webs hang over the hedgerows like shrouds. Great trees loom over the lawns, hiding the palace from view. Only a few lanterns, strung indifferently about the grounds, provide light in the grey-green gloom. The Injurious Princess strides purposefully across the grounds. I know where my usurping aunt keeps her spiders. She has so many she will not notice that we are offering her something she already owns. She frowns. There are also wild spiders in the garden though, if you'd prefer. More impressive than our domestic shortlegs. They would be difficult to catch, however. She grins. Feeling up to a little sport? Oh, we are totally catching a wild spider, let's go. But we could have got a domesticated spider, a gentle creature raised in the tyrant's own nursery, or a wild spider, larger and grander than their domesticated cousins. These spiders run free in the woods of Vestia. They are unbound by the concordat of silks, unless they agree to be. The princess leads you to the heart of the garden, which is smothered in silk. The approach is difficult. Webs catch in your mouth, your eyes, your nose. At last, you come to an old courtyard. Vast, swollen spiders click menacingly from the webs that hang from the crumbling stone walls. At the courtyard's centre is the remains of an ancient fountain, worn to shapelessness. Its base is filled with eggs and spiderlings. You go still as a hunting tiger. Once the great matriarchs are convinced you are no threat, you move. You pluck a child spider from the fountain, a mottled, purple-hued thing with wild eyes and flailing mandibles. A mottled, purple-hued thing with wild eyes and flailing mandibles. By the time you have returned to the palace, it has, grudgingly, relaxed in your arms. It rests there like a tired puppy. You have trapped a Vestia spider. The venerable London Society of Arachnid Keepers would be awestruck were they here to see. Sadly, they are not. So you must make do with the virtue of self-congratulation instead. Wonderful. So now we need to procure an invitation to the party. There are guests in the palace sympathetic to the princess's cause. Eventually, one of them will step outside to take in the air. The Injurious Princess is at your side, a false smile painted on her lips. "I shall guide us," she murmurs, her voice low and dark as velvet. "Though I welcome your advice. It has been some time since I was at court." Arm in arm, you step onto the grand terrace and begin to promenade. Finally, the Injurious Princess gives you a surreptitious nod. From the palace, the butterflies emerge. Tilted nobility, generals and favourites of the tyrant have been drawn outside by the promise of lower company and better conversation. The princess identifies each to you, though she is forced to confess her information is some years out of date. Do any strike you, she wonders, as a wise choice for the princess to seek aid from? So we can approach the Court of Amethysts. He and I were, well, the princess looks momentarily embarrassed. Despite his association with me, he has kept his title. His loyalty is therefore in question. Or we can approach the Emerald Countess. We were friends in the nursery, raised together with our spiders. She has fallen out of favour with the tyrant, the princess says, which may indicate where her loyalties lie. So, we have a choice between somebody who is in power, but has kept their power, or somebody who is losing their power. Now this is a weird one, because somebody who's losing their power may stab us in the back to gain their power back. Somebody who is already in power may stab us in the back to maintain their power. But as a general rule, I like amethysts more than emeralds, so that is literally the choice I'm going to make here. I'm going to go for amethysts. You signal to the Count, who, intrigued, follows you to a secluded garden where baby spiders crawl along the trellises. He lets out a gasp as the Injurious Princess raises her veil. She puts a finger to her lips. "Say nothing," she says. "I come with a request, for the oaths you once swore to my mother." The Count of Amethysts gazes at the princess, bafflement growing on his handsome features. "Anything," he mutters, stunned. The princess makes her request, an invitation. The Count nods, glancing around nervously. "I'll do what I can," he says. "It will have to suffice." There you go, that was easy enough, wasn't it? Let's enter the palace. You have all you need. A disguised princess, an invitation, and a semi-tame giant spiderling. The Injurious Princess takes a deep breath as you approach the copper doors of the palace. She pauses, tense. It is as if she must force herself onwards. She rolls her shoulders, then nods. "Ready?" she says with a nervous smile. As the doors open, you are announced by silk-clad Chamberlain as honoured guests from London. Palace swallows you whole. There is a brief disruption when the princess sees the chamber in which the spiders are to be stored. "This will not do," she says. "I shall put ours in the carriage. I shall be back momentarily." She returns minutes later. "Safely stowed," she says. Ooh, interesting ruse, I guess. The ball is held within the splendid Silken auditorium of size. Stone arachnids with jewelled eyes watch from high green stone walls. Clever engineering filters wine through openings between the fangs. It falls into a gleaming pools with a hushed, whispering sound. Guests in the jewel-hued silks of Vestia mingle amidst the sighing fountains, exchanging barbed witticisms. A contingent of the wounded guard, on loan from their native skit, watch the entrances and exits to the palace. Beneath her veil, the princess is wary. Okay, so we can divert the attentions of the guard, we can secure the carriage, or we can assist the Injurious Princess. Let's divert the attention of the guard. The wounded guard patrol the palace. You cannot get close to the prince while he has their undivided attention. The citizens of Skite are cursed. When they bleed, they do not heal. Most die young. Those who achieve adulthood are, of necessity, as tough as oxhide and ferociously skilled at arms. They bear their burden as a badge of strength, and are much in demand as soldiers across the continent. The tyrant's guard patrol the quiet passages of the Palace of Sighs. They watch from shrouded arches and stand sentinel over disused courtyards, guarding all exits. They operate under the command of their leader, the never-staunched general. So we can either follow the Injurious Princess's plan. If I defeat their general in single combat, they will owe me a debt of allegiance, the princess says, flexing her arms, and I am dying to stab something. Or we can distract the wounded guard. They need not come over to the princess's side. They need only to be distracted enough that when the moment comes, they are looking elsewhere. I think we should follow her plan. She stalks through the crowd like a hunting jaguar, seeking out the never-staunched general. There is a hushed conversation, and then a nod. The duel is held in a rush-lit courtyard, deep in the arteries of the palace. You are its only witness, bound not to intervene, no matter how red the ground runs. The never-staunched general's approach is blunt. He thunders at the princess, his stone axe sharp as a guillotine. Time and again she darts and pricks. Droplets of blood trickle down the blade of her sword like rubies spilled from a cut purse. At last, the general collapses onto the ruddy flagstones. The princess kneels and begins to bind his wounds with her own silken shawl. At last, she stands. "He is ours," she says plainly. "He cannot break his oath to the tyrant, but the guard will not interfere when we change the carriage." Well, wonderful. Do we need to lower our suspicion? Because we can attempt to mingle. The tyrant has assembled a cast of reformers and visitors, keen to witness her plans for a modern Vestia, beginning with the reform of its silk houses. You slide into the crowd of dignitaries like a butter knife into jam. You listen with alacrity. You offer a range of amusing London idioms to contrast with their supply of Vestia proverbs. You smile and smile and smile. These bejeweled hawks circle the tyrant's court, waiting to see what might arise. If a weakness arises to their advantage, they will strike. If the tyrant is successful, they will remain steadfast. It is not so very different an atmosphere from the upper crust London drawing room. Okay, the tyrant's suspicions have changed. That seems useful. Let's secure the carriage. The prince will leave the palace for the House of Silken Flame by carriage. Ideally, yours. You will first have to put his intended vehicle out of commission. The Injurious Princess leads you out from the heat and gossip and bright laughter of the auditorium, and down a plummeting series of stone stairs. Carved into the side of the inner palace, they descend, precarious and jagged. Beyond is a stone series of chambers, a former monastery, the princess informs you, for the anchorites of the Arachnid. It is, she tells you, the part of the palace in which she was raised. The prince's carriage waits in the courtyard, richly adorned and unattended. After all, who would dare tamper with a royal vehicle? Another member of the royal family. We can either encourage the Injurious Princess to linger, request a tour, how long has it been since she was home, there'll be time to tinker with the carriage afterwards, or we can sabotage the carriage quickly. Let's sabotage the carriage quickly. The reins are made of thick Vestia silk, from the house of ash and ember. The princess grimaces, attempting to saw a rein apart with her knife. Impossible to destroy, but not to tangle. The team of pale spiders tethered to the coach stand still as you weave the reins about them, assisted by the princess's coos and clicks of reassurance. No one will know that it is sabotage. It is possible that the spiders just shifted on their own accord, perhaps spooked by some noise from the jungle. You slip away. Okay, now we can speak to a hurried courier. A servant pushes through the crowd, bearing a sealed missive. Rushing past, you watch as almost imperceptibly he passes it to the Injurious Princess. Is this our invitations? The princess opens the note. As she reads, a frown deepens on her face. My brother wishes to speak to us. Now. She shakes her head. This has to be a trap. She unrolls the scroll and something falls to the ground. A ring. It's jewel and opal, carved into a spider holding a scepter in its mandibles. The princess's eyes widen. That is his ring. We have no choice then. The servant leads you through a concealed archway and down a flight of stairs deep into the bowels of the Palace of Sighs. Many of the cellars beneath the Palace of Sighs were once dungeons. The tyrant still uses some for her own formidable purposes, but most are now just wine cellars, or the storing place for tapestries. It is to one of these repurposed rooms that you and the princess have been brought. Before you, a single candle burns in a partially shuttered lantern, resting on a table. The dim light illuminates a beautiful tapestry depicting the fall of a house, the auction of its weavers, and the elaborate funeral of a great spider pierced by the sword of a crowned woman. Well, we can await the hesitant prince. You have been promised a meeting. The servant is walking away. You are assured some measure of privacy. The Injurious Princess stands with her hand on her hilt. Do not fear, she says, eyeing the walls for openings. I shall protect you. He pauses and gives you a look over. Well, fight alongside you, he allows. I will be very annoyed if this is a trap. Someone clears his throat behind you. The Injurious Princess spins, half drawing her sword. Oh, she says. Nothing more. A young, handsome man, meticulously dressed in Vestia silks, emerges from the gloom. Even in the dim light, it is clear that this is the princess's brother. Hello, sister. The hesitant prince takes his sister's hand briefly and gives you a courteous half bow. Then, we do not have long. The tyrant will grow suspicious of my absence, sister. I know why you are here. I have spies of my own. He half smiles. I took on your network when you left. The princess blanches as though stung. The effect of his words have not been lost on the prince, but he continues. I know you came to stop me. I ask that you do not. I mean, to take up the sword and enter the house. It is my time to take up my royal duty. He bows again and walks away, his footsteps disappearing into the dark. The Injurious Princess turns to you, aghast. This is madness. He's too green, just a child. This is plainly the tyrant's doing. We must stop him. I mean, I don't know, he doesn't look like a child. Doesn't sound like a child. You can advocate for the hesitant prince. The tyrant has offered him a task suitable for his station. Perhaps he has his own reasons for accepting. Or we can agree with the Injurious Princess. Whatever the prince's intentions, he works towards the tyrant's will. Yeah, okay, I'm going to agree with the princess here. The princess seems cheered by your agreement. Her bad mood dissipates with each point you make. Still, she says as you finish, he is my brother, and a member of the true royal family of Vestia. We can say as we like to each other, but do tread lightly. He is a prince. She takes a moment to gather herself, utters a curse about her perfidy of brothers, and checks her sword. Come on, she says, we have a party to attend, a brother to liberate from himself if need be. Okay, so now we can assist the Injurious Princess. She means to promote her cause this evening, while she has the opportunity to speak to her countrymen in person. The Injurious Princess takes a breath as she gazes around the courtiers arrayed across the auditorium. A third I know and detest for their disloyalty, another third I do not know and I am suspicious of, and the final third I long to fling my arms around and say, "Do you remember me? I've come home." She drains her glass. But if I am to be accepted here ever again, I must make deals with them while I can. She adjusts her veil. Don't worry, I will remember to maintain my disguise. Let's leave the princess to make her case. I shall test the alliances of those gathered here. Some will still be loyal. I must know who is with me when the time comes. The princess takes a drink of some dark liquid that smells like rum and resin. She places the glass down. "Wish me luck," she says and leaves your side. You watch as she begins to circulate the room. Occasionally, she disappears into a side chamber, or you spot her on the mezzanine or in the shrouded gardens below, always veiled and always with a dignitary, general or countess at her side. She returns an hour later, grim but determined. It was difficult acting as my own intermediary. No one will commit while the princess is absent. But there is a groundswell of support. The tyrant is seen as increasingly radical. Shall we get back to it? Let's attempt to mingle with the crowd and lower our suspicion again. I want to go in with no suspicion. And now we can attend the ceremony of the Silken sword. The carriage is sabotaged, the wounded guard are occupied, and the prince is ready to leave. All that remains is to wait for the ceremony to take place. That picture has changed. The Injurious Princess falls in beside you, as the gathered nobility and attendant spiders make for the courtyard. "I shall arrange things with our carriage," she says. "Best the tyrant does not have the opportunity to see me. Meet me there after the ceremony." She disappears into the crowd without giving you a chance to respond. You follow the nobility of Vestia out into the cool air, where lanterns hang from a dozen dead trees by tangles of webbing. On a dais at the end of the courtyard is a woman, crowned and throned. A scarlet spider sits beside her, massive and bulbous. This is the Tyrant of Vestia. The Tyrant of Vestia smiles and courteously as she surveys the assembled dignitaries. She welcomes them to the Palace of Sighs and thanks them for the benefice of spiders. It is, she says, a solemn day when a great spider of a silken house nears its end, and the house is closed. But its service will be remembered, the fruits of its knowledge continued. She smiles down at the prince and bids him step forward. "A loyal scion of Vestia," she says, "about to embark upon his royal duty." We can witness the princess's ceremony. He will take up the sword so that he may bring death to the great spider and end its house. The tyrant hefts a long steel sword, inlaid with rubies in the pommel. They flash briefly in the lantern light. The woman must be stronger than she looks, for the hesitant prince handles the sword with far less grace. "Go with my blessing," she says, and bring about a new way for Vestia." The prince bows and makes ready to depart. The tyrant's gaze, however, falls upon you. "And who is this, I wonder? The one my palace whispers of, or her friend?" Suddenly, the Count of Amethysts is at your side. "This one is a friend of mine," he says. "From my days of Benthic, I swear it upon my long, loyal service to you, my queen." I mean, that's lucky. Ooh. The tyrant gives the court a long, cold look. Finally, she relaxes. "Of course, Benthic, how could I have forgotten the friend you mention so often?" She turns to the prince, rests her hand on his shoulder. "Regardless, there is no cause for concern. Our prince is resolute. An interloper cannot change his heart. He is familiar with the low opinion this country holds of his sister. There is no risk." So we can make for the carriage. The Injurious Princess waits to spirit her brother to the house of Silken Flame. You need to reach it before the prince or the crowd arrives. You reach the princess's carriage before the crowd arrives. She is already sitting in the cabin, reins in hand. "The driver has been dealt with," he registers your expression. "I did not kill him, but he shall have a hangover of such magnitude that he wish I had." There is a clicking noise as you go to sit. "Oh, do move the spider," the princess says from the front. "Spiders should not be squashed." You wait in silence for a few moments until the prince opens the left door and sits beside you. He has a moment to register you and the princess, and then you are moving. The coach clatters through the gates from the courtyard. The crowd cheers on their prince. The hesitant prince climbs up beside the Injurious Princess in the front cab. The long, ruby-hilted blade of Vestia sits between them like a divider. Both place a hand on it, as though to stop it from moving. The prince turns his attention to the back. He gives you an amiable nod and smiles as he sees the spider beside you. "Good, we have one." He turns back from you and begins a whispered conversation with his sister. Let's listen in. The prince and the princess are having hushed argument in the front cab. It is likely pertinent to the rescue operation. "Can't just whisk me away. I have a duty," the prince begins. The princess clenches her jaw. "I know, and it is an unpleasant one. I will relieve you of that burden and slay the great spider myself. I can look after myself. I have since you abandoned me." The blood drains from the princess's face. The prince continues despite her reaction. "Besides, I don't mean to kill the spider. I mean to replace her." He gestures to the spider sitting beside you. The princess scowls. "That's madness. What will this mean for Vestia? What scheme of the tyrant's is this? You do remember what she did to our mother. She cannot be trusted." The princess runs a hand across her head and lets out an aggrieved hiss. "It will not happen. You have never been to one of the silk houses. You will see. The great spider would never consent. It violates the customs and the doctrine." "But we are going?" the prince asks, voice soft as though regretting his words earlier. The princess nods, outlines the plan. "Good," the prince says. "Perhaps you will change your mind once we are inside." At that, the princess lets out a hollow laugh and turns her attention to the jungle ahead. "Well, let's consult these two." The princess first. "Has the plan changed? If you wait until the prince is dozing, you can speak alone." The Injurious Princess scoffs. "The plan is unchanged. We will close the house and I shall slay the spider. If the tyrant suspects anything, we will be far from the palace by the time she has it confirmed." What of the prince's idea? To replace the great spider? "It is dangerous nonsense. When we made peace with the spiders and joined our skill with theirs, the constitution of Vestia was drawn up. Customs were codified. The spiders are proud and jealous of their product. It is their life's work, their identity. The doctrine of originality forbids the replication of their work. It is why those in the silk houses have no children, why our weavers are separated and sent away when the house closes. He sighs. The weavers are proud. They will be rejected by other houses if they leave a house with its spider still living. My brother will understand when we're inside. He will see that I am right. Let's consult with the prince. Catch his eye. If you wait till the princess is dealing with a treacherous stretch of road, she will not be able to listen. Vestia is governed by so many rules and customs, the prince says sadly. The tyrant wishes to reform some of them. There is nothing to gain by opposing progress just to spite its originator. He frowns. The houses are ruled by a single spider who may not breed. When it dies, the weavers are auctioned off. Both community and continuity are lost. If the spider is replaced, the other houses will reject those weavers acquired at auction. They will be compelled to return. What of the tyrant though, and his sister? He grimaces. The tyrant raised me. He is not a good woman. The stories say she fed our mother to... He shudders and shakes his head. Only stories. But she is arbitrary and ruthless. He glances towards the princess. I am beyond glad to see my sister again, but I am a prince. My first duty is to Vestia. If I can aid its improvement, I must. Well, let's journey to the House of Silken Flame. The prince and princess are agreed. You will not leave Vestia until the matter of the house is resolved. The jungle, which covers most of the country, is both the source of Vestia's wealth and the realm of its arachnid citizens. The great silk houses are built in the depths of the jungle, protected from easy discovery and secluded like monasteries. Your journey takes you to where the tree canopy is so thick, the webs so dense, that the false stars are hidden in such dark. The House of Silken Flame appears as a beacon lit up by dozens of blazing torches. It looms, many-tiered and shrouded in funeral tapestries. Here, the carriage comes to a halt. The house is built from blocks of obsidian. Dark stone peeks from the gaps between the tapestries that densely adorn it. They depict the story of the house, the great spider who designed them and provided the silk, the legion of weavers who turn the spider's dream into cloth. The tapestries need no maker's mark. The silk's uniqueness serves this purpose. Dark figures move in and out of the house, carrying in kindling for its ritual destruction. Nothing is allowed to remain when a great spider dies. Its house must fall. Let's consult the royal heirs. What is to be done with the House of Silken Flame? Crowds gather around the carriage. Vestia weavers expecting a royal visit to bring an end to their great spider and their house. The presence of you and the princess, unknown after a long absence, causes confusion. We must assemble the weavers and gather up the tapestries and silks from the house. Ensure that all is in readiness for the house's closure, the princess says, giving her brother a pleading look. For now, there is no sense in causing distress until we have seen the spider is there. The hesitant prince frowns, but nods. For now, he says. The princess smiles, takes his arm for a moment. I'll leave you two to prepare for the closure while I find where our spider keeps her lair. Then we will head to it together. She slips away. And before we actually go into the House of Silken Flame, I think this is a perfect place for me to end this episode. So thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Let me know what you think. Your comments are greatly appreciated. And as always, I'll see you next time.